Okay,
But then there's the insult side.
Oh yeah, here we go.
That's today's.
Pull up our sleeves.
Oh, honey, where should we start? How long is this episode going to be?
Trigger, activate, snark, wit.
It have complinsults. Let me just tell you, as a woman, take any compliment and then go ... for a girl.
Oh yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. I got to a point where I was overthinking my reaction.
And in overthinking, you took an even lesser stance.
There have been some times a really sarcastic, snarky comment has come out. And then I walk away like, I definitely didn't follow Michelle Obama and take the high road.
I often then say, well, I better deal with this with grace and let's not be snarky.
Yep.
But then that makes me deeper in the hole.
I was trying to make sure that I stayed diplomatic.
We have confounded the belief or the definition of being diplomatic as being nice. Being diplomatic is acquiescing. No, diplomats stand their ground. They just try to see if there's a way to find common ground.
Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Littert.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
And we are going to build off of last week's episode about COMPLINSULT, that moment when somebody says something to you that's seemingly veiled as a compliment, but is really more on the insult side. If you are just joining us for the first time, feel free to jump in and go with us. But I would really advise you go back to the prior episode, because that'll really set the tone for where we're at and what we're jumping into, because we're digging in a little deeper. We're gnawing a little bit more on this idea of what to do now if somebody says something to you that, again, seems like it might be a compliment, but is a thinly veiled insult, actually, or a backhanded compliment. But it actually feels more malicious or a microaggression or intentional or has some energy behind it, rather than a true, pure misspeak. Somebody really tried to do something nice or say something nice, and it just didn't land. So, we talked about that in the previous episode. So if you want to join us there, go check it out first. But otherwise, we're going to get into more of what happens? What do we do? What options do we have? What strategies are before us in those moments when we sense, somebody had an agenda here. Somebody was really, they meant it in a very specific or directive or pointed kind of way. So I will say, first and foremost, I want to applaud that little voice that's in us that helps us discern where on the continuum, the COMPLINSULT continuum, these fall, because I would say that little inner voice is what helps already identify, that felt like it might be pointed, right? So first and foremost, it's just something I want to throw out there. So let me
add something onto that in terms of that little voice. We said in the prior episode, and I kind of dug a little deeper and asked you questions in terms of when somebody was complimenting you on your weight loss, and you said, and I just know that it wasn't, meant kindly. And then I challenged a little bit and said, do you know though? Is it that you know, or is it that you believe, or that's how you received it? And that's where that little inner voice comes in, because a lot of times it's not so much that we truly know what the giver intended, but it's what we believe that the giver of said COMPLINSULT intended. And when we really don't know, and when we take the moment to question ourselves as is that how did I just take it that way? Or did that person mean it that way? Then you can give voice to that inner self and literally voice the question. Did you mean it this way? Or I took it this way. Did you mean it that way? So that we can give that space and grace for the possibility that it really truly was more compliment than insult.
Yes, absolutely. And you shared a beautiful story with your bestie where, your bestie also just really meant to compliment you, but that's not what happened. And you said the same thing, which I believe that she really did not mean to offend me or hurt me or say, you just knew. So thank you for calling that out. Okay.
But then there's the insult side.
Oh yeah. Here we go.
That's
You
today's.
Ready? All right. Let's pull up our sleeves. Okay, so I was a new administrator. Young actually has to do with the story, which is why I started there. I was a new administrator and I was leading a faculty meeting. And there are a number of circumstances I knew already meant that I wasn't particularly popular as an administrator. And I knew I had an uphill battle here to cultivate respect and build relationships. And I knew all of that. And I was game for all of that. What I was not prepared for is that in some public settings, there would be people that would take the opportunities to thinly veil a compliment as an insult, as a way of discrediting me or making whatever their intention was. It doesn't really matter. It still happened. Okay. So in this one particular meeting, I was presenting something and leading the presentation. In the middle, a hand went up and I thought, okay, let's open up a dialogue. And this person said, I'm surprised for somebody as young as you are to speak with such authority. I was really caught off guard.
I bet.
Really caught off guard because now there are all these eyes on me, right? And I knew to that little voice, I believed that little voice inside me was like, that was meant to be a dig. And that was meant to be a dig. And here I am in front of everybody. And I have my reaction, which we talked about the difference between a response and reaction. And my reaction was I started to get red. You saw my jaw start to tighten and my shoulders start to come up. And my body had a word that you used last time, a visceral reaction, right? In addition, internally, my mind is racing, right? I don't know whether or not you could see it, but my eyes were kind of like darting back and forth. And all these things were kind of happening internally. But what was very clear to me was that I believe this was meant to be an insult, right? With a smile. And, I'm surprised for somebody so young to speak with such authority. And, we talked in the previous episode about how sometimes humor can be a way of kind of breaking through it. And in this moment, I was rather proud of myself that I was able to do this. And I said, this particular teacher was an early childhood teacher. And I said, well, as you yourself know, out of the mouths of babes can come such wisdom. Ha, 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 laughter, 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 laughter. And then, we got back to the presentation. Elizabeth, we ended and I went back to my office and I was still trying to process my reaction because my reaction and response were so public. And I was really trying to my choice at that point was try to stay as composed and controlled as possible. But then in the quiet solitude of my own space, I could actually allow myself to be angry or to be hurt or all those things that immediately happened. And then came the thought of, well, what do I do with this? What do I want my now response to be with this person? Right? Because I had my response publicly now with this person. I decided I wanted to go and talk to this person directly and connect. Okay. Because I saw this really as an opportunity to connect, but also to not shy away from saying what it was that actually was going through my mind. But I also asked the question. So, hey, so-and-so, do you have time to chat? Oh, yes, I do. But, I only have a couple of minutes because, we don't get that much time off as teachers. And so, those kinds of things. Okay, that's fine. Help me understand what you meant by the comment in the meeting and, blah, 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 digging hole deeper, and then kind of the nuggets, I can't believe, or I'm surprised that I'm working for somebody who's 20 years younger than me and somebody blah, blah, blah. So all reveals all these revelations about this person. And because of all those revelations, all that data, it was clear that my belief about the insult was true, that it was meant to be a dig. I was so much clearer. I was lifted. There was so much kind of breath in me. And I just said, Well, I'm so glad that I got to ask the question and find out more. I got to tell you, I didn't really like it in front of everybody. That didn't feel good. But I understand you better now. And I just hope going forward, we can have these conversations in the privacy of ourselves rather than having them in front of everybody. Yeah, sure, whatever kind of thing. End of conversation. But I walked away so proud of myself, right?
Mhm.
And so like I was almost smiling, as kind of interesting as that sounds, because I was true to myself.
Yeah.
And I was true to myself in understanding that regardless of whether or not they meant it as more of an insult than a compliment or a compliment, I could then control the response that I wanted because I was ready. I could get more data. I was still ready with whatever data they were going to give me. And then I was still had time to pause, check in, and then respond, and then still walk away and feel like I was authentically me.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Well done. Totally.
Right. But it was just such a clear moment of like, this wasn't oh my gosh, you've lost so much weight. Look how handsome you are. Oh, okay. Well, that didn't feel good, but I know what you meant.
But I know what you
right?
meant. Yes.
Versus, oh, I know what you meant.
And even, and though you knew that it was a dig, you still maturely and from your grounded, centered, secure self, still even asked to give that opportunity to call it out there, but call it out for an opportunity, perhaps that maybe you were wrong, but you weren't, because, however he might have defended himself, revealed that you weren't wrong, but you still gave that opportunity by calling it out with grace, and he showed his true colors, but you didn't judge his colors and react to your judgment. And even though your judgment was correct, you didn't come from a place of judgment. When you posed the question, what did you mean by that? And then not only was the comment bothersome to you, understandably so, but it was the venue or the manner in which he did it, right? There's so many things that are unsaid, right? That really hold the meaning. That he did it in such a public way made it more than just the words that came out of his mouth. So good Absolutely. On you for the way that you handled it.
Thank you. I would say this is one example of, and we don't really like this word, a quote unquote success moment, but there have been many other moments where upon reflection, I'm like, oh, I now, when faced with this moment again, or a similar moment, I now can think about some other options of how to respond. I would be the first one to admit there have been some times a really sarcastic, snarky comment has come out. And then I walk away like, I definitely didn't follow Michelle Obama and take the high road. I definitely took the low road. And while that may have been the cotton candy that felt good to eat at the time, it didn't actually satiate me or help me in the way that I thought it was. And yeah, that little like snarky voice does live in there, and that's totally okay. It's still just not who I am authentically. So yes, this was one like good moment, but I have daily moments, times when I know, or I believe that somebody is trying to get a dig at me, and I respond equally with a dig. And it's still just practice. I'm still practicing, right?
Yeah. So those digs, and then you have like we can say snarky comeback, or I can say, a witty response.
Exactly. Trigger, activate,
yeah,
snark, wit.
It happens. And so cue one of my favorite phrases, and that's okay. So that was an event that happened. Maya Angelou, one of the things that she's most quoted for is, when you know better, you do better. Now, it doesn't mean you do better 100% of the time, but when you know better and then you practice it, you do better. And then the doing better actually becomes your reflexive baseline. You've shifted your baseline of what is your authentic self. We can be authentically, are authentically sarcastic, and that's okay. That's our authenticity, but we can shift our kind of baseline level point of reactivity, and shift that curve a little bit. Good on you on so many ways of how you handled that. This episode, the theme of this episode in terms of the complinsults, where it's more an insult than it is compliment, just cracks me up, because I'm like, oh, honey, where should we start? How long is this episode going to be? Because do you know this? Hello, welcome to my life and many a woman's life. Are you, and we might carve this out because I don't know if this is just a Hawaii thing, but there used to be kind of a running joke of, when you get a Chinese fortune cookie
Mm-hmm.
and you break the fortune cookie and you pull out the message,
Yep.
and, adolescent humor is whatever it says, you add ... in bed. Is that okay? Yes. So I didn't know if that was just a Hawaii thing, but no. You can take anything and then make it like, an X-rated fortune cookie by putting ... in bed, right?
In bed.
So COMPLINSULT, let me just tell you, as a woman, take any compliment and then go ... for a girl.
Oh yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you speak pretty well for a girl. Oh, you're pretty assertive, or you're pretty aggressive for a girl. You throw like a girl. Like that's just, even when theoretically well-intended, there is no question that there is subtle, perhaps subconscious, to the person saying it, but there is that subtle subconscious, microaggression. And I know those that don't believe that microaggressions exist are now going to get all defensive with me, like, oh, here she is getting all defensive. But I'm just stating for a fact, microaggressions exist, and they've happened to me on a daily basis as a minority, as an immigrant, as a woman. So since they do exist, and since they do often happen, again, the onus is on me so that I don't hole myself in a box and shield myself from the world. I just recognize what will be my reaction and my response to it. If I'm going to allow myself to be triggered every single time, or do I just recognize that it happens? And sometimes there are times where I am threatened because of it, and then I am activated to do something. I say that in terms of even being complimented as a woman for whatever, looks, beauty, sexiness, whatever. It comes to mind something that a former medical student, who she's now actually a professor at Stanford, reached out to me a few years ago for an incident that I don't even recall. And it was when, and forgive me if I shared this for a different reason in another episode, but this applies to this episode as well, which is, I don't even remember doing this until she reminded me. And then I remember doing it, but like it had escaped my memory for 20 years. But, it was like, I think National Physicians Women's Day. And so she reached out to me to tell me that when she was a medical student and I was a general surgery intern and she was on my team, she recalled a particular incident. And that incident was when, I was with the chief of surgery had a case, and I was the intern assigned to the case. And he and, the couple of medical students were already in the room, the operating room, as the patient was being prepped and draped. And I came in after them because I was a little bit late, appropriately so, because I was coming in from another emergency. And then I came into the operating room, and the chief and chairman of surgery, so truly my boss. Yeah. He was somewhat new to the program, but he was there, and I came in hurriedly, and the scrub nurse was gowning and gloving me. And as the scrub nurse was gowning and gloving me, the chairman said, "Oh, Dr. Ignacio, I hope I'm there when that comes off." And he said it in that way. Which, first of all, what a stupid comment. That's like such a weird, like, come on, really? Like that's a come on line. Like that was super stupid. But anyway,
good for you.
Yeah, it was so lame. But clearly he meant it that way. Well, that was a moment where, though he thinks that it was a compliment, which I don't know what that compliment was, that I was like, that was like a sexual. Yeah. Come on, I have no idea what that was. But it was, but still, my reaction, it was immediate. That it was in its complimentary way veiled threatening
Oh,
comment,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
or at least I should say I felt threatened.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel safe by that comment. And so my instant reaction is I didn't need to correct him. I didn't need to ask him, Dr. So-and-so, what did you mean by that? Oh, no. That activated me. And I literally, as an intern, that is like lowest on the totem pole as an intern. Okay. You're like the fly on the poop of the dog. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's as low as you get as an intern. But as soon as he said that, my visceral reaction, that this medical student remembers is when he said, "Ooh, I hope I'm there when that gown comes off." I, that very moment said, and I ripped off the gown and I said, "Oh, you will be," took the gown off and I walked out of the room.
Wow.
And my medical student remembers that. And again, now, 20 years later, she's now a professor at Stanford, but she said that was a moment of empowerment that she will never forget. And that is, to loop it back to this episode. I know that this feels like a tangent, but when there are times when you allow space and grace and reflect a question back as to, is this what you meant? Or you call out for clarification or even for lesson learned. But then there are times that you're not just triggered, you're activated. You stand in belief of how you took it and how you receive it, and you go with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that too much of a tangent, Zachary?
I don't think so at all, because I think what I hear in that, I will say thank you, because that helps me, is there are times when a boundary was crossed, a line was crossed. And because of that, this is going to sound dismissive of everything that we're saying, and I really don't mean it that way, but the discernment and the curation of a response is unnecessary because it is so far past a boundary that your reaction is your response. And that needs to be incredibly clear because somebody has gone so far as to cross so far into a boundary. And now you feel unsafe. You feel harassed. You feel sexually harassed. You like all of those things. And I just thank you for that, because one, as an administrator, I often was trying to make sure that I stayed diplomatic or political, and everything was fine and okay. And I never could show sometimes my true thoughts or my true reactions or responses in reactions, etc. I'm kind of stumbling over this, but what I basically am saying is that I got to a point where I was overthinking my reaction.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's just in overthinking, you then take an even lesser stance. So not only did you just get insulted, but now because you're overthinking, then you actually often, or I often then say, well, I better, deal with this with grace and let's not be snarky. But then that makes me deeper in the hole. And I put myself there then.
Yes. I just wanted to say, I didn't mean to take it away and make it about myself. What I wanted to do was actually just connect with what you were saying and give power to the moments when you are very clear, almost viscerally in a way of like, I am going to respond this way, and I'm going to respond clearly. And just, I thank you for giving that, because I needed that permission. Even though I could have given it to myself, I needed that permission. And I imagine many of our listeners probably do too. So I just, excuse me for taking us on the tangent. I wasn't trying to make it about me. I was actually trying to thank you for what you shared in that story.
When we were, joking and kind of talking about how we'd want a snarky, a snarky comeback kind of thing. I mean, I'm sure Dr. So-and-so, the chairman, probably received my behavior as a snarky comment when I said, "Oh, you'll be there when the gown comes off," and I took it off right there. He can even label me as dramatic, reactive, histrionic, such a woman, hypersensitive, and that doesn't matter. That when you yourself know in your gut, in your inner GPS, that not only was it an insult, but it was a threat to you in some way, shape, or form, then you stand your ground and you take action based on that. Not for others. I didn't do that so that Dr. So-and-so can teach a lesson and that he never behaves that way again. I hope he never behaves that way again. But no, that was for me. And you know what? That was okay. It's okay for me to stand my ground and do that for me. How awesome, though, I must say that here 20 years later, my med student, now Stanford professor, says that she recalls that, tells that to her med students, tells that actually to her colleagues as an example of not having to take shit, not having to receive an insult, elegantly. Sometimes it's not about being elegant. Sometimes it's not, I'll say this myself, sometimes it's not about always having to have the grace.
I'm really actually having a reaction to this episode, and I'm just going to put it out there because I think also, how do I even talk about this? First and foremost, I'm going to say that the amount of times that this happens to women, I can't even imagine. And that alone, I'm just getting worked up about, because I, as a queer person, I get some of these often, but I just can't imagine on the daily, the amount of comments that women get. And that, so I'm already just responding to that. So I'm just going to be really upfront about that. And then secondly, just the power of being able to decide how you're going to take and respond is tremendous. And then also the power to then be very clear and very quick and very direct, and not about the other person, but only purely about yourself. Forgive me, Dr. Ignacio, but I don't know why this is getting to me. I don't know why. Forgive me.
There's nothing to forgive. There's nothing to forgive. I thank you.
It's just whoa, it's like bringing up all this stuff. Whoa.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. To your point and to your situation, how I applauded you and how beautifully you handled that scenario with that subordinate who's trying to be insubordinate. And you astutely and wisely, ascertained that, hey, this is an environment we're going to be having to work together a lot. And this is something that I can, work with and work through. And that's why you handled yours with such grace. There was, we keep using the word discernment. I love that word, obviously, but there was that discernment of well, what is this to me? How am I going to handle this? Because what is this to me? I want a good work environment, and therefore I can work through it this way. The bottom line, I'm using all these academic words. The bottom line is how much do you care, and what do you care about the situation, right? So because you, as an administrator and as a leader, you want to create and foster an environment of working together and it being collegial. That's why you handled yours so beautifully, because that's what you cared most about. And that was wonderful. In my scenario with this chairman, I cared most about the fact, don't you dare ever talk to me this way. And, whether it's in private or yes, in front of these medical students and all of my other colleagues, that's what I cared most about then. Either way was the quote right way to handle it based on what we cared about. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does.
So I had, and sometimes it's a matter of who is the audience that you're reflecting back to, or who was the giver of the COMPLINSULT. There's a discernment in terms of how much do you care, or are you going to care about not only the situation but the person that gave it. So in your scenario, it was important, and you cared to learn more about where he's coming from. Now, learning more about where he's coming from validated your feeling that it was an insult, but still, how could you work through that for your greater mission of creating and fostering an environment? Then the flip side with the chairman is he had crossed a boundary so much that kind of sexual innuendo that I cared most about. No, never do that again. I will not stand for that. Then there's also, as there is in everything in life, not the opposite extremes, there's in the middle,
right?
Which is, again, a compliment, but actually an insult, but an opportunity to teach and see if said relationship can continue with that understanding. And what I mean by that is, so I have a patient who just went on and on and on in his way, being complimentary about the fact that I'm Filipino, but gee, doc, you speak so well and you use such big words, and you don't mix your F's and your P's, so you don't sound so stupid. You talk pretty good, doc. And that gave me a little moment of pause because I was triggered because, my parents, though we have lived here for, as immigrants, we've lived here for decades now, yes, my parents still do speak with an accent. And so still sometimes from time to time, change their F's for their P's and change their he's for the she's. And so in this patient's comparing me as if I'm better than that. Yeah. And anybody who speaks with exchanging of the F's and the P's and the accents are less than. I felt triggered to make a point. And then what he does with that point, that's up to him. And my point was this. Their accent doesn't in any way indicate that they're stupid. If anything, it indicates how smart they are because they speak multiple languages. How many languages, you American, do you speak? Most are one, right? And so, and by the way, also, I don't speak good. I speak well. If we're going to be talking grammar, but in my pointing that out, you are actually showing. Oftentimes, some of the most over opinionated are the underinformed. Yep. He was revealing what little he knew or understood of being bilingual or multilingual, and how in his complimenting me, he was actually putting down my not only heritage, but my direct family. And so, but was that enough where I had to stomp out of the room, like I did with my chairman? No, but I felt strong enough that I'm going to make a point, allow a space once I make my point to see how he'll react. And if this physician-patient relationship continues, great, I'm here. I'm, you mentioned taking the high road, not the low road. I'm here for you to help you. And I won't hold this against you. Now that I've said my piece, if you can come to the middle with me for this, I won't hold that insult against you. I'm not going to judge you, as, an idiot, a bigot. And do you know what I mean? It's more ignorance, and one can give space and grace to ignorance by providing information. And then from that place, do we continue down this path of you insulting me? And are you going to dig deep into the insult? Or are you going to recognize that there is a place where we can come to the middle where, yes, thank you. I recognize you're complimenting me. So thank you. I appreciate that you're complimenting me. Do you recognize this? And can you walk this journey with me, recognizing that? That's the in the middle scenario.
Yeah.
A lot of words. Does that make sense?
It does. And in all of those options before you, they are all authentically you. And I think in now you sharing that story, I now have clarity about what my emotional reaction is. And I will say this, you have given permission for the timing between the reaction and the response to be very quick and to still be authentically you. I know I sometimes err on the side of I need to pause and I need to really reflect and I need to put a lot of time in between. And I think that has done a disservice to that knee jerk, this is exactly what I want to say. And I will walk away from it being very proud and happy with what it was that I said. But I turned that off because I felt like I needed to be more diplomatic or whatever the other labels that I'm putting myself in there. And so not every situation falls into the you've crossed a boundary and now it's I'm unsafe, or I feel like that's a sexual threat or harassment or whatever. But most of the time they live in the middle of that one with your patient. You can still have that shorter time between the two and still be you, very clear, and then also give opportunities for the relationship to continue. You're open to it or not, but you've made yourself very clear. So I just also want to come back to I have some clarity now that has come out of your also establishment of the situation in the middle, which is really probably where most of these things actually exist, right? It's probably rare that it's in the extremes. It's actually most of the time in the middle. Okay, so in this episode, we have been looking more at the complissults that are more on the insult side. We established in a previous episode those times when somebody says something to us, a backhanded compliment, if you will, and we have believed that it was really intended with the best of intentions, that this person really meant to do right by us and to say something nice, even though the delivery was different than what the intention was. I just knew that we had stumbled upon a really big topic here. And appreciate that we got to get into it a little bit more, because I will say at the end of last episode, I feel like, how do I say this? I feel like being able to take some time to look at the times when it doesn't feel right or it doesn't feel good, or we sense more of an insult, is where I'm still practicing and doing better, per Maya Angelou's quote. And this is where I myself was like, I want more. I want to be here more. So thank you, and thank listeners for going with us on this part 2 of this episode arc, because I think I've held on to wanting to say things or do things at a cost of being like diplomatic or being professional or and I think I'm uncovering a lot of those feelings of like, I didn't actually honor myself. So I'm just kind of like working through that right now. So I'm sorry. Does that make sense?
Don't apologize. And that's totally makes sense. And that's important. And it brings up a good point, which is it's not either or though, right?
Yeah.
You can be diplomatic and you can be strong. Do you know what I mean? But we have confounded the belief or the definition of being diplomatic as being nice. Yep. Being diplomatic is acquiescing. No. Diplomats stand their ground.
Yeah.
They just try to see if there's a way to find common ground.
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know that I really recognize that until right now. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, wow, this has been a journey. Which is why coming back to this has been really beneficial for me.
The great news is no matter what, well, first of all, when we work on when we work on ourselves and we ground ourselves and center ourselves and know what matters to us and know what our priorities are, know what our values are, and listen to our inner GPS. Truth be told, both compliments and insults really don't weigh in, because that's other people's opinions flavored with their own intents, good or bad.
Right.
And if we put too much weight on compliments, then when the compliments go away, then we're nothing. Mm-hmm. If we put too much weight on insults, then we're way down and we feel less than, because we put so much credence and weight on other people's insults. When we do the work or practice doing the work of listening to our inner GPS with self-love, self-worth, self-compassion, then truth be told, the compliments and the insults don't matter.
Yeah.
And when they come our way, it's really up to us how we receive it. Mm-hmm. Because everybody, you're not just simply enough.
You are more than enough.
Just as you are. Period. Mwah.
Mwah.
Love you.
Love you.
And that's pure compliment. Mwah.